quick programming note. We have bonus material from this episode. Almost 20 minutes more worth of conversation with Gus, Luke, and David as we continued our conversation following the interview. If that's something that's interesting to you, then become a member on Patreon or on Substack. Become a paid member. Just follow the link in our show notes to patreon.com/IHearOfSherlock or iHearOfSherlock.substack.com. Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from MX Publishing, with the largest catalog of new Sherlock Holmes books in the world. New novels, biographies, graphic novels, and short story collections about Sherlock Holmes. Find them at mxpublishing.com. And from listeners like you who support us through Patreon. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/IHearOfSherlock. I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 284, BrettCon.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became astronomer.
In a world where it's always 1895, it's I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we interview authors, editors, creators, and other prominent Sherlockians on various aspects of the great detective in popular culture.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
Hello and welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And Bert, what are you going to con me out of today?
Your conning tower. You're not using it. And I need to begin scanning the horizon for approaching ships.
Well, perfect. If only you were in Baltimore when they needed you.
Yeah.
Sad.
What a disaster.
It really was. And I wonder if there's a Sherlockian connection to that. There was a shipwreck, as far as we know, the Lone Star in the Five Orange Pips. To the best of our knowledge, it looks like there was a shipwreck and the Lone Star went down after Holmes tried to track the criminals down and send them his own Five Orange Pips. But, and of course, the good old exploding Gloria Scott. So, some naval disasters there.
Well, I must say, if I had encountered Sir Arthur on a steamship, I probably would have been nervous.
Why is that?
Well, look at his track record. I mean,
well, the good news is, and if you remember going back to, I think it's episode 48 when we talked to Dan Stasauer and John Lellenberg about dangerous work. When Conan Doyle was on that Arctic whaler, he spent most of the time in the water.
Well, not most of the time, but as Lellenberg pointed out, we certainly came very close to not having Sherlock Holmes.
That's true. Sure. That is true. Yeah. Well, we have Sherlock Holmes and more for you here today. We have a wonderful interview lined up with the hosts of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes podcast, as well as their producer. They have a big announcement to make. We'll be talking about that shortly. And, of course, we have the canonical couplet quiz after the interview. You want to stick around for that. We have some items from the IHOSE vaults that we're going to give away, and we are going to announce the winner of the previous canonical couplet, who will be winning a copy of Canonical Cornerstones by Rob Nunn and Peter Eckrich. But we should remind you that if you're looking for the show, we are available across all podcasting platforms. Found a really neat service called episodes.fm. If you go to episodes.fm on your browser and you type in I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, there are about 30 different podcasting platforms from which to choose. So wherever you are most comfortable listening to us, we are there, and you can find it on episodes.fm. Of course, you can also support the show via Patreon or Substack. If you are on Patreon, starting at, I think, the $5 level, or $3 level, we do have some thank you gifts for you. And everyone who is a Patreon supporter, we do thank you profusely for what you do for us. And you don't have to be a member of Patreon to participate in the canonical couplet. That is open to absolutely every single one of our listeners. And you can do the same if you are with us over on Substack. So check out the links in our show notes. And of course, we will have links to all of the things we're talking about in this episode today. Okay, as usual, we begin the show with items from the Sherlockian News Vault. Quite a few things to discuss today. Where would you like to begin, Bert?
Let's begin in Baltimore. We were just talking about that very sad tragedy, that the shipwreck in Baltimore. But there is Sherlockian news in Baltimore for April, beginning April 26th, at the Fells Point Corner Theater, FPCT, in Baltimore. There's a new play called Miss Holmes by Christopher Walsh, directed by Brad Norris. It is a gender-swapped reimagining of the detective duo, and it premieres next month. It has one of London's first female surgeons, Dr. Dorothy Watson, teaming up with gifted and bold detective Miss Sherlock Holmes to help a newlywed wife who has received an ominous anonymous note. And the duo discover secrets of a corrupt police inspector with a trail of dead wives. And it sounds like an enormous amount of fun. It's inspired, obviously, by the cases of Sherlock Holmes, and it re-examines the Victorian world by adding the nuance of the obstacles faced by the main characters, who are women in an age particularly unfriendly to women.
Well, that sounds fascinating. And, anytime you can work in the phrase ominous anonymous into a sentence, that's a great band name, isn't it? We're going to hear the Ominous Anonymous tonight at the Strand.
How about Anonymous Ominous, the other? That's their evening review after the show. Yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, let's stay in Maryland for the moment for the next news item. It looks like Enola Holmes and the Mark of the Mongoose by Nancy Springer. And you'll recall we interviewed Nancy Springer here on one of our previous episodes. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. Enola Holmes and the Mark of the Mongoose has been nominated for an Agatha for Best Children's Young Adult Mystery Novel. And the winners will be announced at Malice Domestic in April in Bethesda. And that is Malice Domestic 26. You ever been to a Malice Domestic?
I have not.
Oh.
Have you?
No, but I've created some. Peter Blau tends to attend those, or has in the past, and being that he's in Bethesda too, it makes great sense.
Interesting. Well, then we also have other news about our old favorite, the BBC Sherlock series, which is now, it had been on Netflix, and is now available to stream on Hulu and Disney. So it is reaching new audiences, and there are new ways to revisit that great series.
That is wonderful. I wonder if in the Disney Plus app, if you've watched The Great Mouse Detective, if this will come up as a recommended, on your recommended watch list. Kind of a different audience segment, but interesting. Let's see. What else do we have here? And we're going back to January from this, a little bit of a retrospective, but Queen Camilla hosted a reception at Windsor Castle on January 30th. And it was a reception for authors, illustrators, and binders who were involved in creating a new modern-day miniature library collection. And that'll be housed alongside the Doll's House. This was famously the Doll's House that Queen Mary created. And, of course, the Doll's House library includes Conan Doyle's manuscript for How Watson Learned the Trick. And the 20 authors of the new miniature books include Anthony Horowitz, who has contributed A Tiny Ghost Story.
Very good. Yeah. Well, and also on auction news and things you want to acquire and put on that little empty spot in the shelf. It's still available, friends. It's the single page of the manuscript of The Crooked Man, which was offered on auction at the end of February with an estimate of $40,000 for this single page. It went unsold. The bidding only got up to about $32,000. Randall Stock discusses the manuscript at his fabulous website. If you haven't visited that, take a look at bestofsherlock.com, and we'll have a link in the show notes. It is one page, not signed or dated. It's about 1893, and written in ink on lined paper. And the most notable thing about that page is the change of the villain's name from Robert Barker to James Barclay. And also, a different name for Nancy DeVoy also. So there is some of those interesting things, and there are photos and things. So check out Randall's website for more, and save your pennies so that the next time it comes up, you can bring it home.
Yeah, meet that minimum. Well, rounding out the news here is another item of newsy interest. The February issue of the District Messenger, which is the newsletter of the Sherlock Holmes Society of London, is the first issue edited by Holly Turner. Holly has succeeded Gene Upton in the role of newsletter editor. And if you haven't subscribed to it or taken a look at it before, the District Messenger is the British equivalent of Scuttlebutt for the Spermaceti Press, which is what Peter Blau puts out. And all of the 180-plus issues are archived on the Sherlock Holmes Society of London's website. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes. If you aren't yet signed up for email updates from MX Publishing, well, you're missing out. There are lots of freebies available for fans of MX Publishing that come out regularly. Every Friday, Steve MX sends out Thank Holmes It's Friday. And the latest one has top picks of 2023. If you use the code 2023 at checkout, you'll be able to get a discount on some of these titles. And if you sign up for the email updates, you'll also have access to audio codes for free audiobooks from MX Publishing. Titles like Sherlock Holmes, The Coronet Conspiracy by James Patrick Heatherly, The Selected Cases of Dr. Watson by Martin Daly, and Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Bedeviled Foot by Thomas Kent Miller. Also, you'll be the first to know about new titles as they're released in 2024. Titles like The Devil at Prayers by Elora Lawthorne, Sherlock Holmes and the Barnyard Caper by Danielle Calloway, Sherlock Holmes Eliminate the Impossible by Paula Hammond, and Sherlock Holmes 5 Miles of Country by Gretchen Altebeff. Make sure you're signed up for email updates from our friends at MX Publishing. Just go to mxpublishing.com and register today. Some of you may recall our interview with Luke and Gus Holwerda from the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes podcast, all the way back on episode 203 in season 14. That would have happened in October of 2020. Well, Gus and Luke have still been at it. Their show is going like gangbusters, and they've got a big event coming up at the end of May that we're going to talk with them about. So Gus and Luke Holwerda are going to join us here once again for a wonderful conversation, and this time around, they're joined by David Youell, their first fan and then producer of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes podcast. We'll find out exactly how David came into that role and the critical role that he has played over on the other side of the pond. Luke and Gus, welcome back to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. And David, welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
This is going to be a party.
Oh, boy. Well, because Sherlock Holmes technically, or I should say legendarily, wore the deerstalker, that's the fore and aft, we can have the party in the front and the back. So...
Excellent.
Either way. Well, Gus and Luke are old hands here, but David, this is your first time with us here. Why don't we begin the way we begin with all of our new guests and ask you, how did you first meet Sherlock Holmes?
Okay, I'll try and keep this short. So I actually, for 4 years, lived in Denver, Colorado. And I remember reading...
I was picking up on that Denver accent. I don't know.
Yeah, that mile-high breathing. And I remember reading at school the Encyclopedia Brown stories. I don't know how famous they are.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys know what they are.
Yeah.
So I got into sort of mysteries quite early, and then that sort of led... My dad sort of led me on to... buying the complete works, and I sort of read through them quite early. So yeah, I guess that's how I found Holmes, in that I always enjoyed mysteries and solving things, and my parents put me onto them.
Well, that sounds just delightful, actually.
Now, this is why I like doing other people's podcasts, because I didn't know any of that stuff about David, so that was great to learn.
Yeah, they've never talked to me once. They've never asked me any questions. We barely know each other.
Gus and Luke, what else would you like to know about David? Maybe we can help here.
Where do you live? Like, where are you from, by the way?
No longer Denver, Colorado, funnily enough.
You got a very funny accent.
Yeah.
We talked to both of you last time, about the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes podcast with, just your passion for it and the output and everything. But I don't think we got into any of the back end, the technical stuff. So this is a great opportunity to kind of perhaps fill in the gaps there and talk about how the three of you connected and how the system, how the process all works between you.
Yeah, well, Gus is working on the back end of it right now, so I think Gus can tell you all about that.
Well, we're currently, we're hard at work on the Hound podcast right now, which is a monstrosity, which we'll talk about. But technically speaking, the podcast is kind of divided into three parts, and the first part is the kind of the retelling of the story, and in which we use clips, obviously, from the Jeremy Brett Granada show. And along with that, we kind of pepper in all the the trivia and as much history as we can about the show itself. And I tend to do the preparation and the recording on all that. Then we kick it over to Luke and I for a discussion conversation portion where we just riff on the whole thing. But in the midst of all that, we tend to incorporate as interviews, which is something we didn't do very early on because we just didn't have, we didn't think about it. We didn't try for interviews. We just thought we're just going to talk and it'll be that. But then kind of out of the blue, in a very early episode, we received an email from a listener named David, and David said, look, I'm here in England, and I'm probably a lot closer to these folks that worked on the Granada show. If you'd like, I'm more than happy to, help you guys out on this side of things. And of course, we just jumped right on it and said, David, you're going to regret saying that so badly, but we're going to put you to work. And David just jumped right in, head first and started bringing interviews to the table. And that really changed the show, I think, and how it's all come together. I mean, the Hound episode that we're working on, my goodness, it's almost troubling how many interviews we have for this one. I mean, we've spoken to, geez, David, you're gonna have to help me. We spoke to Christopher Tabori.
Well, I think if you're playing Hound interview bingo, you're pretty much going to be shouting house soon. Because we've got Chris Tabori, we've got Alistair Duncan, we've got Fiona Gillies, we've got James Faulkner, we've got Trevor Bowen, the writer, we've got Kate Turner, the costume designer, William Ilkley, who played Selden. And it's
June Wyndham Davies as well.
June Wyndham Davies, of course. Yeah. And I'm still looking for more. This isn't the end.
Right. There's probably some more, but no, this is kind of, well, and it's a special episode, it's a big one. So we wanted to kind of pull out all the stops and make sure we talked to everyone we possibly could. And we did. And I'm hoping no more trickle in because we're actually getting ready to pull the trigger on this episode. But yeah, no, it's very special. And technically speaking, I mean, again, Luke does a lot of the research when it comes to our conversation about the books, and which we try to kind of work into the formula as well. But as with everything, our love stems from our adoration of the Granada show and Jeremy Brett's performance, and so everything tends to have a focus in that direction. And we just do our best to kind of fly by the seat of our pants when it comes to the scholarship of the books, which if you guys listen to our show, you might cringe sometimes. I know you guys have corrected us on pronunciations from time to time, which I frankly am supremely grateful for because I hate embarrassing myself in a podcast format.
Well,
I try, guys. I try.
Yeah.
we embarrass ourselves here regularly, so we're no strangers to that. So, I mean, that's fascinating that you were able to get so many of the original cast and crew there. By any chance, were you able to track down the puppeteer for the Hound?
Surprisingly,
I don't think we tracked down the puppeteer, but we have heard stories about this Hound and how they were going to make like a high-vis suit for the dog and all these different experiments that just never happened. And it's been a really weird experience working on this episode. Because like we all have kind of our thoughts about how this episode turned out as an actual episode of TV. But when you read reviews of it and you read even like the Sherlock magazine's new issue, which talks about the Hound episode, it's very dicey the way people talk about it.
Very mixed. Yeah. It was rated. It was in a recent listener, I guess, reader poll. It was rated the number 7 episode of all the Granada episodes, which frankly shocked me. I was kind of surprised that it rated so highly, and others like the ones that I love, like the Solitary Cyclist, didn't even make the top 10. But to each his own. And it's a lot of these. This is something really interesting about our podcast is, we get so many emails from people who want to tell us, what their favorite episodes are, and it's never what you'd expect. I mean, not to throw any particular episode under the bus, but the number of people who tell us The Eligible Bachelor is one of their favorite episodes is like something I would have never expected to hear, but it does happen.
We did the Sign of 4 episode, which we didn't think we were being harsh about, but we thought we were being honest about, and that was maybe the only time we've ever really got like negative feedback from listeners about like, you guys got this so wrong. This is one of the best episodes ever. It's like, well, okay.
But I think that you got to put it in context too, because I think I rated that one an 8.5 out of 10, which was maybe one of my lower ratings at the time, but it's still an 8.5. I mean, it's not a terrible review, you know. So
yeah, I think we tend to risk sometimes being too nice and flowery about the series, and so like every now and then we try to be a little bit critical, and I think people don't like that sometimes.
I think what we, and that's the royal we, tend to forget to do is that even though we're critical of a certain episode, we're within the Sherlockian sort of bubble of the series. And actually, even at its worst, if that's not too harsh of a word to say, but even at its least best, we'd still rather watch that than many other series.
Right.
Exactly. That makes sense. And look, the Hound of the Baskervilles, it's one of the most popular stories in the entire canon. One of the favorites that people pick out and that people still remember, even if they're not very familiar with the entire canon itself.
Right.
And I have to imagine that as filmmakers, well, of course you're going to bring a critical eye. And this has traditionally been one of the most difficult stories to faithfully adapt. You think back to the Basil Rathbone era, well, they threw in a whole seance. And they renamed the butler. They changed his name from Barrymore to Berryman. It was largely because the Barrymore family was so well known in Hollywood at the time. But there have been the tarantula in the Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee version. You know, there have been bastardizations of this story since time immemorial. And I think one of the most difficult things has always been to get the Hound right. Like the shark in Jaws. You know, it works well because it's off screen most of the time. It's in our imagination. Then when it does appear, well, it had better be bloody well terrifying.
You know, almost to that point, though, that I actually not prefer, I shouldn't say. I actually really like the BBC Sherlock series for that reason, because it's not really there. You know, it is just in your mind. So I think they play on that in a positive way, in a really interesting way. And like, you're right. Like, I can't remember an adaptation where I went, wow, that Hound was very scary.
Like, they nailed it. Right.
Yeah.
I think the best adaptations of the Hound generally have been on radio, because first of all, what you said about the Hound being in one's imagination, but also I think the key to the success of a Hound adaptation is allowing the Moor to be its own character.
There you go.
Which you could argue is lacking in the Granada one.
Yeah, I think that's so astute. We had Bert Coules on the show back in episode 68 and 69.
Yeah.
And that was exactly the thing that he pulled out, is that the Moor was treated as a character. And, you know, when you're short on budget, when you're short on special effects, that's going to suffer. And I wonder, you know, as filmmakers, as you look at this now, and with the knowledge of what CGI has done to the filmmaking process, do you think that there is a future Hound of the Baskervilles that could be made that's better than any of the previous ones combined?
Well, I'll tell you this, Michael Cox thought so, because he closes out his chapter on Hound in his book talking about how he didn't believe that they rose to the occasion with their Hound. He's quoted as saying it received the bad notices it deserved, and that the Hound, you know, you're going to make it. But he closed out by saying, now that Steven Spielberg has made Jurassic Park, now there's hope that we might get the Hound of our dreams. And he actually implores in his book Steven Spielberg to be the one to do it and to make up for stealing the title The Lost World for his second Jurassic Park movie. But I don't know. I mean, I think the Granada Hound is probably, I mean, you guys can probably correct me, but I think it's probably the most canonically accurate of the adaptations that have been made for the screen. And not to say it's totally accurate, but it's one of the closer ones. And where they failed, as you'll learn in our next podcast, it generally was because it wasn't because they didn't want to keep it true to the book. It was because they just ran out of money and they just couldn't do what they wanted to do. And that's kind of the biggest that's kind of the biggest sadness of everyone who worked on Hound, is just that they did it for all the wrong reasons. They did it to save money because they were supposed to deliver 2 episodes to finish off the season. And they thought, well, you know what would be cheaper is if we just do 1 big episode. And so let's make it Hound. But as Michael Cox said, it was just the absolute wrong reason to do it that way.
But, another thing is, I do think TV also makes it suffer a little bit, because I think if there was a movie version of Hound, you could build the atmosphere and you could build the dread in these kind of long, slow burn type moments, which you can't really do on TV because you'll just lose people. And I do think there's a way to do that. I think like the atmosphere of the moor could be looked into and experimented with. And I mean, Gus and I we were in England at one point, and we found ourselves walking to this weird house and across the moors, and we were like, oh, it's neat, we're in Sherlock land, But then as we were walking back, the sun went down and this thick fog just rolled through, and we were like stuck, and we didn't know which way to go. And then the animals started appearing in the fog. But, they ended up being cows and bulls and things, but it was like, this is weird, And so like that kind of mystery and dread, and I think that could be elaborated on, but maybe not on TV.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be the next installment, The Cow of the Baskervilles. Who knows? I'm kidding.
Maybe it was a cow the whole time. That's the whole point.
I will say this, though, when it comes to audio presentations of the Hound, I agree with David. I think it actually, most of the audio dramatizations have been quite good, or in many ways better, I guess, than some of the film ones. But the audio in the Granada Hound episode, if you ever have the opportunity to listen to the Hound snarling in your headphones, I highly recommend it, because, frankly, just for comedy value. The Hound was played by Percy Edwards, who the voice of the Hound was played by a person, for those who don't know. And he went on to be very famous. He did Fizzgig in The Dark Crystal and Ambrosius in Labyrinth. He was known for doing animal sounds, but my oh my, if you listen to the sounds of the snarling Hound, it's quite a performance. And I would say it borders on comical, but really only when you're paying attention to it, because they were going for something very, very demonic, and I'm not sure they fully achieved their aim with that one.
Yeah, that's what happens when you cheap out on your budget. You could get a good sound design team in there to really work their magic, but no, we went with Percy. Well,
it could have been worse. They could have done what Hammer did and get a Great Dane and stick a mask on.
Right.
Well, yeah, they basically did do that. This is the most fascinating thing about Hound is they actually tried very hard to get the Hound right. They had the Great Dane, they had the big dog. They also had an animatronic robotic head made for close-ups. They also had like a stuffed puppet. They had all these angles, but in the end, it just none of it worked. And so you barely end up seeing the Hound because, frankly, all of them looked terrible and all of them looked wrong. And so again, it's just I agree with Michael Cox and Jeremy Brett. They were both very disappointed in how the actual animal looked on screen. And so it was basically edited out of the film. I mean, you barely see the Hound in the existing version of Hound of the Baskervilles because of those reasons.
Yeah.
I think when anyone ever watches the Granada Sherlock Holmes, and perhaps in a way they were ham-fisted by the sheer quality and of everything that came before it, but you just end up watching it and thinking they should and could have done so much better. It's not bad. It's just not as they didn't set the standards as high as they did in previous episodes.
Yeah.
So this 2024 is the 40th anniversary of the very first airing of a Granada Sherlock Holmes episode. I can't believe I'm saying that, because I remember when those were first aired, maybe the year after, on PBS and on the USA Network. I remember seeing them, and it was the exact same time that I had first discovered Sherlock Holmes in print too. So I had this amazing convergence of realization of Sherlock Holmes as a character, thanks to Conan Doyle and thanks to Jeremy Brett. And I know the Sherlock Holmes magazine just released their 40th anniversary celebratory edition. But you guys from the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes podcast have a little something up your sleeve as well. You want to tell us about BrettCon?
Yeah, well, it's the 40th anniversary, but it also happens to be the 5th anniversary of the podcast, which, we've made a lot of friends over the past 5 years. People like David, just other fans of the series who communicate with us, and then all the cast and crew we've spoken to. And I know we said it, but we've spoken to so many people that we haven't even aired their interviews yet. But we've got long lists of people that we've spoken to, and Gus and I are kind of isolated from everything because of where we live. So it seemed like just an obvious thing to do to kind of get ourselves and our listeners and some of these cast and crew members and put together an event and celebrate the series and do a big special screening of one of the episodes. And we thought we'd call it BrettCon because why not?
Yeah. Well, and what better place to do it than in London? But London's a big place and an expensive place. So we're just outside of London.
Just outside of London.
Yeah. But I mean, a good portion of our audience is based over there and here. But that's where all the cast and crew live. So that we decided for logistical reasons that it was going to be much easier to get a lot of very interesting people to join us if we held it over there, and that's why we decided to do that. But you're right. I mean, celebration is the key word. I mean, we're the response to our podcast has just been, I don't know, it's something we never expected in a million years. But there are so many fans of this show out there, and still finding it. I mean, we got an email just a day or two ago from an 18-year-old listener who just found the show, just found the podcast, and is loving it like it just came out yesterday. So, I mean, I think we use the word timeless a lot, but the Granada show really, I believe, is timeless. And so we just want to do our part to celebrate it. And I think we're in a unique position because of all the people we have spoken to kind of bring them all together. And, so that the fans can meet them, they can meet the fans, and we can hear their stories firsthand about Jeremy, about Granada, about their adventures making the show, and about how important it was to them and how it stands up for them after all these years. And spoiler alert, everyone who worked on the show it loves it, and everyone has nothing but positive things and happy memories to share. And so again, we've been so lucky to experience those stories firsthand, and we just thought, this is the perfect opportunity to share all of that with the listeners. And so BrettCon was born, and we're so excited, looking so forward to it. It's going to be such a fun time.
I'm sure that part of the program, is still kind of a work in progress depending on people's availability. But what can you tell our listeners, about the general organization of BrettCon and the program and so on?
Well, I think, as we said, I mean, a big part of this is going to be kind of, we want it to be, I don't know if intimate is the right word, but we want it to be a little bit of a reunion for the cast and crew members, because as we speak to these people, they go back in their minds and they think about their time on this episode. And a lot of them go, I forgot how much I loved this, or it was so early in their career that they didn't know how special it was at the time. And so people, we do our interview and then they go back and watch their episode and then they write us again later and they go, I can't remember how good that was. And, people that they've missed and like they want to reconnect with people. And so that's part of it, because we did want to bring these people back together and celebrate their work and their time on it. But it's also our listeners the same way. They want to interact. They want to meet each other. They want to come together. And so we did put it out to people that way, as we have this idea. Does anyone want to do it with us? And overwhelmingly, the answer has been yes. Like we have to do this. Like we want to get together. So we're going to, we want to bring people together. We want to do kind of panels, we can do Q&A type things, talk to the actors. We have writers, we have directors, costume people. We have so many people that we can speak to. And then we want to cap it off with a big screening, anniversary screening of The Blue Carbuncle, and have a bit of a reunion for that episode. And director David Carson will be there. it just feels like a way to cap it all off, and it's the jewel in the series for sure. So it felt like the perfect way to do it, and it's the 40th anniversary. Everything just came together, and it's magic.
And of course, it's just been announced as being the most popular episode in the vote that the Sherlock Holmes magazine did. So, I mean, happenstance worked in our direction in that respect.
Yeah, but we'll be having panels. I mean, we're going to have an actor panel, a writer-director panel. We're hoping to do, a reunion panel. I guess we might as well just start dropping some names because there's a lot of people who we've already announced and we'll be announcing even more once schedules firm up. But Christopher Tabori, who actually played Sir Henry Baskerville in Hound of the Baskervilles, will be joining us. He'll be part of a panel that's going to be a reunion of the actors from that episode. So, I mean, again, timely in terms of our podcast and talking about Hound. But after having talked to these guys and ladies from Hound, let's just say that they were a particularly rambunctious group during the filming of that, and they have quite a few adventures to share with us. And frankly, it's great to hear these stories, and a lot of these stories will be included in the next podcast we do. But there's so much that a lot of it can't be. And frankly, they all became the fastest of friends, not only between themselves, but also with Edward Hardwicke. Edward, you might not expect it amongst with the young group, but Edward became like a lifelong best friend to this cast. And all of them essentially, were breaking down in tears talking to us about Edward because he was just such a special person. And so Prim, Edward's wife, Prim Hardwicke, will be joining us, and we've spoken to her on the podcast too. And again, she just so many stories to share of Edward's time and Edward's time with Jeremy and the special relationship they had. And so it's going to be a very wide-reaching kind of gathering. I mean, like they said, actors, writers, directors, wardrobe people, camera people. It's going to be a jam-packed day. To say nothing, I mean, we have, but we haven't even dropped the names yet. Alison Skilbeck will be joining us. She played Miss Harrison in the Naval Treaty, the one who nursed Percy Phelps back to health. We have Matthew Solon joining us, who played the unhappy John Hector McFarlane. Yes, in the Norwood Builder. You guys might have to start helping me out.
Jack Claff, the Honorable Philip Green, who's on horseback in The Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax. He's a character.
We've got Oliver Tobias, who was Captain Croker in the Abbey Grange. No, the Abbey Grange?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
No. Yep. Obviously, David Carson, director of a lot of our favorites: Six Napoleons, Musgrave Ritual, Blue Carbuncle. Catherine Cusack, Ross Simmons, who played Catherine Cusack in the Blue Carbuncle. We're actually going to have a lot of the members of the Gowers family, Patrick Gowers family, there to speak about kind of the music of the show.
Yeah, we've actually been working on a special episode for quite a while now that just is dedicated to the music of Patrick Gowers, because he really was, in my view, an underappreciated and just incredibly accomplished composer. But obviously his music is, at least in my mind, it's always going to be the soundtrack to a Sherlock Holmes story. And his family have been very supportive of the podcast, and just love talking about their dad and his daughter Catherine. Played violin in the opening credits of the show. Excuse me, in the opening credits of the show. So, it was a family affair for them, and they constantly had Jeremy over for dinner, at their house and that kind of a thing. So, it's just everyone has stories to share, and there's so many of them. It's like as long as our podcasts tend to go on, sometimes like there's no way we could ever share all of these stories because there's just so many. But I just think I don't know. I think people are gonna love hearing these stories, especially about Jeremy and especially about the creation of the show. It was such a special time.
I was going to say that some of the best stories that we've had in the interviews that we've done. I mean, I do want to drop in there that we're now up to, I think, 82 interviews all in all, cast and crew, that we've done. But some of the best have been from the crew, the people that worked on it day in, day out, that saw every shot through the camera lens, that held the boom mic for hours upon end whilst take after take. And we've got a lot of the Granada crew coming. So we've, obviously David Carson, as we've mentioned. We've also got a couple of other directors coming in, John Bruce, who worked on the very first series, and John Gorry as well. And, we've got sound operators, camera operators, DOPs. We've got production assistants, we've got editors, we've got a lot of really cool people coming that may not be sort of the names that we've already mentioned, but they've got the fascinating stories. They've got the day-to-day interactions with Jeremy on a completely different level than some people that worked with him on camera. So I think that's going to be the sort of real jewel in the crown for our event, is these people that haven't been as heralded as others, but that have these amazing experiences that we could only have dreamed of experiencing ourselves.
Yeah, and the at least one of the main people we haven't actually mentioned is Esther Dean, who was the costume designer for the series. She'll be there with Kate Turner, who is also a costume designer, and they'll be bringing a selection of props and costumes, and like Jeremy's favorite penguin suit and his top hat, and just a bunch of little items. And we're actually kind of reaching out to listeners, because we know people have props out there. We know people have collected things from the set. And so we're actually reaching out to people going, let's bring them, because we're going to build like a little exhibit into the stage. So it kind of might feel a little bit like you've walked into 221B when you show up. And we wanted to have some aspect of the actual show there. So there will be props and some costumes and things for people to check out. So it's just turning into this really neat thing. And it really is just because everybody loves the show and everybody wants to kind of come and bring their toys, and we all get to play with them.
Are you guys feeling like you're missing out yet?
Incredibly. I am.
I would be very surprised if one of the outgrowths of this, one of the results, was just not another huge resurgence of interest in posthumous recognition for Jeremy in a BAFTA award.
Oh, I'd love to see that happen. We keep trying.
Talk
we
about
keep
this
trying
all the time.
Yeah.
You should get somebody from BAFTA to attend, and explain why they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've been very, I don't know, it's been very strange trying to get through to BAFTA. We have spoken to someone at BAFTA, not a high up official or anything, and they basically just said they won't do it. It's just not going to happen. Doesn't mean we can't keep trying. It doesn't mean there couldn't be a different kind of honor. Like we've been speaking about, like maybe a blue plaque for Jeremy. A Hollywood Walk of Fame type situation has been discussed, but these things are expensive, and it would take some backing and things like that. But we're trying. We're always thinking about it. But we're doing our part as much as we can.
So all of this takes place in the span of one day, huh?
One long day, yes.
It's one long day, but we have actually kind of we let it kind of drift over to the day before and after, and because we know there's going to be a lot of relationships built, and people are going to want to meet and talk, and when there's an event going on, you kind of can't really do that. So we've actually spoken to our listeners and said, we want to meet up the night before and kind of have like just a get to know you type situation at probably a bar somewhere. Then we'll have the event. And then the day after, we're going to go to London, and we're going to visit a few of the locations, shooting locations, a couple of Jeremy locations. We might hit the inspiration for the Alpha Pub. And it kind of, again, utilizing a listener situation. We've set up this a shooting location website, and one of our listeners built this website for us so that listeners could write in, give us data on where these things were shot. And so now we have like a map of all of England where every episode was shot. And so we're just going to go through the list in London where we can and hit as many as we can, and then try to end up either at the Alpha Inn or the Sherlock Holmes pub, and just kind of make it almost 3 days. It's probably going to be more like 2.5, but yeah, the event's going to be jam-packed. No doubt.
And we're all going to suffer from brain fever after the week following.
For sure.
That's what they're calling hangovers now?
Well, yeah. British hangovers, yeah.
That's amazing. So tickets are available. We will have a link to the ticket site in the show notes. We'll also have a link, obviously, to the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes podcast.com website. I suppose before we close out, we should also mention you've been the champions of props. We were delighted to receive one of your packages from the second Relics collection. Talk to us about how that's been received and what perhaps future plans might be.
Well, it's been received. The fans absolutely love them because Luke and I are crazy prop guys. I mean, we're those guys who always want to have the replica of the thing from the movie, and not just any replica, not just a store-bought toy. We want the thing that looks like it could have come right out of the movie. And so when we set out to do the Relics, that was the goal, to make it absolutely perfect to the screen. And the second batch, which included the Napoleon bust, they sold out pretty quick. And we are going to be doing another run of them after BrettCon. It's just our time is all being spent on that because everything's handmade. I mean, Luke and I essentially, we got it down to a science, but we make it all by hand. And so, but what's very interesting is at BrettCon, we should have in our possession at that time one of our Napoleon busts that we've made, which were based on 3D scans of one of the original props. But with luck, we'll also be having the original prop from the show there. So side by side, we should be able to see exactly how similar they are, which is very fun. And believe me, we have lists, and we hope to do a volume 3 of some new and different things. But again, we do have a few irons in the fire at the moment. On top of all of this, Luke and I are in the middle of filming a movie, so there's only so much of us to go around. But I'm glad you guys got those, and glad you guys appreciated them. And with luck, there'll be more to come. I think there will be, right, Luke?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And again, this is kind of another listener-driven thing because we couldn't afford to do it if people didn't want to take part in it. So. Kind of the way I've been looking at it is that we're all just kind of as a community getting these things made. And so to me, it's just been fun to be able to kind of find the objects that like sort of crystallize an episode and then try to pull them off the screen. And what I never wanted to do was like put any kind of branding on anything, because that's the one thing I hate is like when you find a cool t-shirt or a cool prop and then it just says like Jurassic Park on it. It's like, well, I didn't want that. I just want it to be genuine and clean and what it looks like in the show, and just have it on the shelf. And so lists are unending about what we could do next, and it'll just come down to what people want, basically.
That's really wonderful. Well, the Relics collection, certainly the podcast, and of course BrettCon, all things people ought to check out. Is there a cutoff date for registration for BrettCon?
There's not a cutoff date. I think it's just when it sells out, which it's on track to do. And the event is May 25th. So as long as there are tickets available, they'll be available. But it's over half sold, and they really, frankly, just went on sale. So I think if you want your tickets, get them soon. We'll be making some other very big announcements soon. Those who have listened to our podcast probably know the people that we've spoken to, and without going into too many details, I think it's worth saying that we have quite a few big announcements still yet to make, but we're waiting to lock them in before we do. So if you're a fan of the show, I would say don't wait, grab a ticket and join us at BrettCon in Guilford, because it's going to be, I don't know, I hope it's not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I hope it's maybe just the first of a handful of in-a-lifetime opportunities, but it's definitely going to be fun. And I wish you guys could join us. I wish you guys could be there with us.
Oh, I do too. I really do.
There's still time.
Mm-hmm.
Bad timing on my part this May, unfortunately.
What is it that Holmes said? If inconvenient, come all the same.
Exactly.
I wish I could. Well, before we let you go, one final question, and that is, since you've been doing the show, I mean, you've obviously built up a wonderful database of interviews. Are there any, perhaps cast members or folks associated with the show, that you didn't get to interview that you wish you could have?
Oh, Gail Honeycutt comes to the top of the list. We had been in communication with her and tried for like the last year and a half, and unfortunately, she was just too unwell, and then we lost that opportunity. But again, a lot of people ask us, when are these interviews going to get released, and they take time to produce and release. But what we've decided is that it's more important to gather them and get them while we can. And so, for example, I mean, we spoke in the last year to Michael Culver, who played Musgrave, who just passed away.
Yeah.
We spoke to Michael Jaston, who played
Earl of Ruffton.
Right, in Lady Frances Carfax. Yeah, in Lady Frances Carfax. He passed away also not long ago. And so we were lucky enough to speak to them, and we do have those interviews, and we will release them, when we can. But I think the goal is just to talk to everybody that we can, because, it was 40 years ago, and most of the people were, already getting up there 40 years ago, a lot of these actors, and we've lost a lot of them already as well. But there's as we get into the later episodes, the show spanned a decade, so that there's still a lot of people still working, and hopefully a lot of those actors who still love talking about the show will be joining us at BrettCon. But in terms of other interviews, I don't know. I'm trying to think of anybody out there who, that would be the.
Well, there's a big one, which would be great to get, would be Jude Law. For a number of reasons.
That's true.
I mean, I'm sure he'd have a very unique point of view on the show and the series and Sherlock in general. But we've also just been kind of lucky and fortunate enough that we've been able to at least even just have a communication with certain people, because there have been people that didn't want to do it. Either they were too nervous or they were too shy. But we've had some kind of interaction with them, which has been nice for us as well. And I mean, Sir Ian McKellen sent us a letter saying basically no thanks, but thanks for reaching out. And it was even just that was kind of a neat back and forth.
But he also said that he did know Jeremy a little bit, and he not well, but he shared a story or two about Jeremy Brett, which was great, and so he took the time to think about it and to send us a nice note. So yeah, no, that was great.
We just feel very fortunate.
Yeah, you never know what it'll lead to, because we got a letter from June Wyndham Davies very early on in the podcast saying, love what you're doing. Thank you so much. Here's a story about Jeremy. And that eventually ended up leading to her doing an interview with us. And so, she's 93 now, I believe. And but 94. But she had, I mean, every word that came out of her mouth during that interview was just an amazing story. Insights into Jeremy, insights into the Granada production. That she hasn't done a lot of interviews, and she hasn't written a lot on the topic. So the fact that we're able to contribute that to the history, that data is now out there for people to learn more about the show. To me, it's why we do the podcast. It's the stuff we want to know. So if we want to know it, we like to think that there's other people out there who share our passion for the show.
Yeah.
We've been incredibly lucky. I think when we sort of early on in the podcast, after I jumped on board, we talked about sort of the golden trio. I'm not even sure that was the right phrase we used, but you get the idea. And we've been incredibly lucky to get two of the three. And, two of the three were initial no's, and it took years to get that no into a yes.
And the three being David Burke, June Wyndham Davies, and Michael Cox. And unfortunately, we lost Michael Cox while the podcast was going. And again, we tried so very hard to speak with him, but again, he was just unwell and just didn't work out. But we have his book, and his book is the Bible for anybody who loves this show. It's the book to read.
I know we've moved on, but my answer would have been Peter Wingard. I would have loved to have spoken to Peter Wingard. I'm not sure I need to explain why, but just an enigmatic presence. I'll leave it at that.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Well, our golden trio here, Gus and Luke and David, thank you so much for joining us here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
It's
you.
been great.
Thanks for having us. We will raise a glass of brandy to you at BrettCon.
I feel informed and sad by our conversation with Gus and Luke. I'm sad because I'm not going to be able to get to BrettCon, and it sounds like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Well, maybe there'll be another one, but it doesn't sound like there'll be anything like this again. But I'm informed and interested, and what a treat to talk to David Youell and to find out, among other things, that he is somebody who came to Sherlock Holmes from Encyclopedia Brown, and I think that's what he said, didn't he?
Yeah, he did,
and,
when he was in Denver.
Yeah, and also his role in connecting Gus and Luke with many of the fascinating people they've been able to interview. That's really wonderful.
It really is. And that's the wonder of BrettCon right now, is that this is happening in an anniversary year. Well, I suppose any year could be an anniversary year, but it is a zero-numbered anniversary year, so those are more significant on the 40th. And this allows them to still connect with people who were associated with the show. If they wait for another 10 years, well, fewer of those people will be around, so it won't be clear that the same kind of thing will be possible. And speaking of involvement, this is wonderful when a listener kind of steps up and ends up becoming integrated into the program. I think we've seen this in spades with Eric Deckers and his wonderful canonical couplet contributions over the course of our seasons here. And we have another listener-inspired segment that we are going to begin probably at the end of April on our April 30th show, which will be episode 286. I'm not going to say much more about it right now, but let's just say you will be hearing of Sherlock everywhere in this new segment, so you have to stay tuned for that. All right, it's time for everyone's favorite Sherlockian quiz program. That's right, kids. It's Canonical Couplet, where we give you 2 lines of poetry and we ask you to come up with the Sherlock Holmes story that you think we are talking about. It's always fun, and prizes are granted to those who are the correct answers that have been chosen at random. So the last time we were here, you'll recall we gave you this clue. When days grew dark for luckless Hector John, the wood pile shed its lurid light thereon. Bert, this is up to you. Do you know which canonical story we're talking about?
Yes, that's the story about the eccentric American bedspread designer who supposedly left a huge sum of money to his relatives. It's the case Watson called The 3 Garish Beds.
Oh, gosh, no. Not even close, I'm afraid.
Never.
Fortunately, our friend Eric Deckers, as we mentioned, to the rescue. He says, I've got it. It's the new romance sweeping the nation about a man who can change into a staggeringly handsome grizzly and sweep a young woman off her feet. It's the adventure of the bear who thrilled her. Oh.
What?
Wait, Eric says, I may have glanced at Bert's Amazon wish list by mistake. Actually, I think it's the adventure of the Norwood Builder. Not the bear who thrilled her.
Bear who thrilled her.
See what he did there?
Yeah.
Yeah, Eric, I may have to pull out the losing horns for you, too, this time. I'm not sure. Well, no, it is the Norwood Builder, which Eric did get right in the end. And we had quite a few entries here, so we are going to pull out the extra large prize wheel and give it a spin. Going around, slowing on number 62. Number 62, and that looks like it is Susan Abbott. Susan, congratulations. We will be getting a copy of Canonical Cornerstones off to you, so stay tuned for that. And now, here's a chance for everyone to participate in this episode's Canonical Couplet, where we have another prize from the IHOSE vaults. Here we go. A love triangle that ended in tense altercation. One suffered death, and another mutilation. If you know the answer to this episode's Canonical Couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with Canonical Couplet in the subject line. If you are among all of the correct replies and we choose your name at random, you'll win. Good luck. Whoo-wee.
Wow.
A lot of fun.
Fabo.
Yeah. Well, I think we've done about as much damage as we can do here, Bert, unless you would like to stick around and do more.
Yes, sure, that's fine with me.
Yeah. I think our listeners might object. Well, we do have another wonderful interview coming for you on April the 15th. Oh, that's tax day. Better get to work on that. We can pull out all of our old Jack Benny tax jokes again.
Well, just bear in mind that you do not get representative government of this quality inexpensively.
Yes, that is true. And thanks to Eric Deckers, I do have a bear in mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, this remains the nearly unbearable Scott Monty.
And I'm the completely burdensome Bert Wolder.
And together, we say, the game's afoot.
The game's afoot.
I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.
After the episode ended, the conversation kept going. And just for you, because you're a supporter of our show, we have this bonus material.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
Well, this is great.
Superb.
Well, you guys are very sweet to say that. I know we ramble. Apologize.
Oh, no.
Again, speak for yourself, Gus.
I got the Nobel Prize for rambling. Sorry.
There could be multiple prizes.
Yeah. In fact, I think somewhere I'm still giving my acceptance speech.
Somewhere.
Is your BSI name the Noble Rambler?
I like that. That's great.
I had a question for you guys. I'm curious because you've done so many of these, or at least been to so many of these Sherlock conventions and things like that. Like, is there anything you haven't seen that hasn't been done that you're just like, why isn't anyone doing this?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Like maybe a dancing men dance off?
Well, it's interesting because I haven't been there. I've spoken to many people who have, but 221 BrettCon, which takes place next month down in Atlanta, they get hundreds, if not thousands, of people there. And they have multiple tracks happening over the course of, I think, 2 days. And it's extraordinary from what I understand. And there are all kinds of panels and discussions and angles about the stories and the adaptations. And if it hasn't been done, it would probably happen at 221B.
Yeah.
That would be my thing.
But the only thing I would say is that my experience of conferences, I just got back from one that ran this weekend in the Midwest in the States. My experience is that it's the connection side. It's the ability to meet people, to find time to talk, also to have some level of ability to connect to people you meet after the conference. So if you just have a list of email addresses and names and things like that, or a place where people can connect, I think it's the connecting part that really people come away with stars in their eyes about the conversations, the people they met, and particularly with what you're doing. It's the personal side rather than the activity. I think that'll be huge.
See, I 100% agree with you, because I've actually gone to and I've hosted my own meetups for Brian May fans for the guitar player from Queen.
If you'd like to hear more of this exclusive conversation, just join us as a paid subscriber.